Welcome to a new episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem. It's the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry through interviews with some of the best in the business. For this episode, I sat down with Anthony Cervino, someone you may know from the Faceoff Sports Network and RotoWire. We had a great chat about all kinds of things, including how Anthony started podcasting, being a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, mental health and overcoming addiction, doing rankings, the importance of Football Follies and WWF wrestling when growing up, his supportive wife, what SEO is all about, and a ton more. Make sure to follow Anthony on Twitter at TheRealNFLGuru. You can follow me, Kacey Kasem, at TheKaceyKasem, and the podcast at GetReal_pod. My content is found with RotoBaller, Fantasy Six Pack, and South Harmon Fantasy Football. And check out SundayDreamersClub.com for some rad fantasy football inspired t-shirts. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now, here's my conversation with Anthony Cervino on Get Real with Kacey Kasem. All right, so yes, somebody I haven't talked to in a while, but somebody I've known in this space for a very long time. All right, I'm talking to Anthony today about life and fantasy football and the industry and this crazy world. We're just going to get into it all, but I just wanted to thank you first, Anthony, for coming on the show because, like I said, I've known you for a really long time, and you've always been such an awesome dude. So thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here and, finally come on. Again, we were talking off air. You've been doing this for a few years now.
Yeah, yeah. And I've got such a list of people. Like I can't even start to even. And it's been over 100 episodes, and it's just been awesome. So, but having you on here and getting to kind of get your backstory, can you just kind of go over your relationship with sports when you were growing up? Did you play? Did you like sports? What was the whole thing there?
It's funny. I've always been into sports, but the two that I can remember, and I'm 39, so I was born in 84. I remember identifying at a very young age with NFL films, and there was no NFL Network, and there wasn't a lot of NFL centered content, but NFL Films and Steve Sable, who was the actual creator of it, they would do Football Follies. So I remember anytime Football Follies would be on TV, and I think they were smart because if you're older and you watch it back, they had a lot of like similar sounds from like Looney Tunes. And so they had a lot of like cartoon ish things that would attract kids to it. So, it was Football Follies and then WWF, or now WWE wrestling. Those were the two things I really grew up on, but I absolutely loved sports my whole life. As far as playing them, I played football in high school, but didn't play a lot of organized sports growing up, more so just in the neighborhood and with my friends. But I think you kind of know at a young age, or at least I was very self-aware that I was probably not going to be a pro athlete. So my way to, I guess identify with sports is, and I've heard others in the industry, on podcasts, it would say this, and I'm like, wow, like I thought I was the only one. I would get the NFL magazines or a baseball magazine, but they had the rosters in it. And I would, anytime there was a roster move, I would white it out, put the new player in, all of his stats, and then go put whenever this other player I whited out, put him wherever he goes. And that is, I guess, the beginning of my obsession with knowing who everybody was and where they played. So I started that off at a very, very young age. Probably most kids were playing with, Batman action figures. I was whiting out player names in magazines.
I like that you brought up Football Follies because that's kind of oh man, that just triggered a memory because I was born in 84 as well. Shout out. And yeah, I remember watching that too. So Thank you for bringing that memory back into my mind. So how did you, or when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? You knew you weren't going to be a professional, sports player, right? You weren't going to be an athlete. Sure. But what were you going to be? What did you want to be when you grew up? A cop. Okay. Yep. That sounds like an answer that was a lot of
that was what I wanted to do. My uncle was a Jersey City detective, and he was retired in like 93. And he was like, my parents were not together, so he was like the father figure. So I always wanted to be a cop.
Awesome. Good answer. Good answer. I like it. So what about fantasy football? How exactly did you fall into that?
Similar to anything else, like I don't know the exact age, but I think what more recent fantasy players don't realize that fantasy sports has been around forever. And my first exposure to it, and this is where my obsession with the magazines and the player names came in handy. My uncle and my stepdad were in a fantasy league, and one year they brought me to this draft. I didn't know that. I just tagged along, but I knew more about where certain players played than they did because I followed it. I can remember being in drafts where Vinny Testaverde and Wayne Corbett were good picks from the Jets. Like that was my first exposure to fantasy drafts. So, in probably the mid 90s. And I wasn't drafting myself. I just sat back and listened and watched and took a very large interest in it. And then, I started helping them with their teams as I got older. And then after a few years of it, I started being co-managing teams with them. And that's where it all began. I think my first actual fantasy draft, it was the year that either they both got hurt or one got hurt, but Terrell Davis and Jamal Anderson, they were the big running backs at the time. And I think they both suffered season-ending injuries. And that was my first fantasy draft. And anybody like the league commissioner in these, there was no computer doing it. Right. So like the league commissioner actually earned like a lot of leagues would do, well, the commissioner buy-in's free. Well, they're free because he would actually have to take the newspaper, and everybody had to agree. It was usually the Daily News, New York Daily News, and he would have to go and tally all the scores by hand. He would write out or type out a newsletter, and before email, he would fax it. And then email started becoming prominent, and then he would email it out. But that's how everything was tracked. The commissioner would do everything by hand, and there was no snake drafts. How we drafted before the internet, and started doing snake drafts and everything, we had a deck of cards, and the ace was the number one pick. And all the way down to whatever, 10 or 12 guys. I think it was a 10-man league. So every round, if you got lucky, you picked number one in every round. It's just everybody picked a new draft position every single round. It wasn't fair. If you got hot, you were picking from the number one spot every round, but eventually that obviously changed. But yeah, that was my early memories of fantasy.
Wow. That is such a thing to wrap your mind around, that's how you guys did that. And
remember, have you ever talked to Jody Smith on here?
Yes.
Did he bring up, I remember because we would have these conversations, because he's been playing, actually, he was a little bit older than me, but he's been playing in these leagues. I remember him telling me his first league was a touchdown only league, and I think they still play in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's been a while since I talked to him, but I do recall that. Yeah.
He likes telling that story. But yeah.
It does sound very Jody. So yes. So when technology started improving, we get the internet, we get email, like you were saying, and transitioning from doing going to the news to find the stats to actually being able to do it like that. Like, how much of a change was that for your league?
I don't remember that per se, but I'm sure everybody was cool with it. Yeah. Most of these guys were older businessmen anyway. So like they had email addresses, they had fax, so like, but I do remember the first platform we used was CBS. So like that was like the league we were always in, was a CBS fantasy league.
And so, and people nowadays have no idea the kind of, like you were talking about being a commissioner and what the commissioner had to go through during that time. How did you guys select? Was the commissioner just already there when you joined?
Always the same guy.
Always the same guy. All right.
And then when he passed away, and then his brother took over.
Oh, okay.
I think the league might still actually be going on. So, but I'm not in it anymore. I haven't been, but yeah, it was just like my stepdad owned a paving business. The guy who ran it owned a florist. So it was like just a, family and friends. My uncle got roped in just because they needed an extra guy one year. And my stepdad asked me, he's like, all right, I'll do it. So that's kind of like, it was like people everybody knew.
And then how did it kind of grow for you so that you started learning more about fantasy football, getting in more leagues, doing all that kind of stuff? How did that progress from just the one league to, getting, going through the,
Well, the NFL, the magazines turned into fantasy magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would go through, and I remember seeing different type of league. There was auction leagues, and I didn't quite understand. I was still young, but my uncle was like, all right, let's partner. Let's do a team here. So he kind of got me into multiple teams, and me and him partnered and everything for a while. And then I obviously got a job, got my own money, and started doing my own thing. But very early on, I was managing quite a few teams. And it was and at this time I was probably a teen, right? You have to work, and the internet was a couple years old at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would do a couple teams, and then that obviously grew into something out of control once I actually got into this industry.
Yeah, I can only assume. I mean, I get that 100%. So, well, bringing up the industry, how did you first come to the realization you wanted to start putting content out and doing stuff in the fantasy football space?
I never knew there was an actual fantasy football space. Like, I didn't know. I just knew that there were magazines, and I didn't know that there was actually like these were jobs. And I was in sales, car dealerships for a good chunk of my 20s. And if anybody who knows me or has listened to Podathon, I had an issue with painkillers and opiates stemming from a car accident in my mid-20s and neck surgery. So after going through all that, I'm 11 years off opiates now. So they're no longer obviously an issue. Thank you. But after all of that, I'm like, wow, it's like I have almost like a second chance in life, right? Because you get out of rehab and you're starting over. All this, I had a lot of success in sales, made a lot of money, blew it all. Right? When you're living that life, you make a lot of bad decisions financially, especially. So it's like, wow, I got to start all over. I can go back to what I'm good at, or I can go chase the dream. So I'm like, let me go see if there is anything happening with the NFL or fantasy football. It was never really fantasy. I always wanted to be a radio guy for the NFL. And this was at the time, Sirius and XM weren't even merged yet, but Sirius had their own NFL channel. That's what I wanted to do. But the more research I did, I saw a greater opportunity. There was a foot in the door for covering fantasy sports. I'm like, well, I'm good at it. Maybe I'll use this as my in. So I decided I can go walk into most car dealerships and go get a job tomorrow.
Right.
So I knew I had a fallback. So I'm like, let me go for it. And I applied as a news desk writer for Fantasy Pros. And it was for the NBA. And I like basketball, but I just kind of yeah, I know the NBA. I knew nothing. I just wanted a chance.
No, I get it.
And that, I was doing news desk blurbs. That was my foot in the door, per se.
Yeah, and you kind of got in on it early. I mean, maybe not early.
Fantasy Pros was not big. Fantasy Pros was still a baby when I got in there.
Right. And I remember Fantasy Pros being the go-to site at that time because there wasn't really a whole lot of other stuff out there, So to follow your journey in this whole space, because just to see you continue to grow and all the things that you have going on. But when you first started out, not knowing there was an actual community out there, not knowing that, when you were deciding, hey, I'm going to take this shot, what was the hardest part of that whole start? I know NBA isn't your jam and all that jazz, but what was something that was you had to overcome when you first started out?
I think it was the unknowns, but it was also easy because I was just overcoming what I was overcoming. So it's not like I was leaving this paycheck.
Right.
Right. I had a little squirrel's nest from a settlement. from the accent. So like I had a little bit of squirrel. So it wasn't like I was leaving like, oh, leaving this high paying job. Like I was already out of the business for a couple years because the addiction became way too much to continue working, and that consumed my life. So it was like, that was the hard part, was knowing where to go next. It was just, okay, there's Fantasy Pros. What's next? And that's when I found Fantasy Twitter and started becoming more involved and kind of learning the ropes of the industry. But it's not like, I feel like it wasn't like it is now. Like now people are willing to help others. Back then it was like, you can or you can't. There wasn't a ton of help.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe it was me, but I don't feel like people were as outgoing to help others like it is now or the past few years.
Yeah. And there are so many more people in this space now too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's part of it. But yeah, it's interesting, like finding Fantasy Twitter, or not even finding it. It just kind of found me, right? Because I was already on Twitter before fantasy football was even a part of my life. And then starting to follow accounts, getting, podcast recommendations and going to follow all those people. And that's kind of how I built up as a consumer of content, because that's what I was doing, just consuming as much fantasy football content that was out there at that time. So
I wasn't a big content consumer.
No?
Like I said, I didn't know there was much content.
Yeah.
My whole, like, it was just CBS. I just did everything on CBS. I thought CBS was like the king of fantasy.
Right. Yep.
Even when I first got into business, I really didn't know any better. Like most of the time, like I would buy the magazines, Fantasy Diehards and CBS. That was my exposure to fantasy. Like my start sits were Jamie Eisenberg. I think he was back then. So like, then I'm like, wow, like there's this whole slew of websites out here now. So yeah, that was, it was very eye-opening for me.
Okay. So what was your next step in, getting out there and putting out more content? Like, how did you start putting out more content, getting seen, and, working for other places?
I felt like there was only so much growth doing the news desk at Fantasy Pros, so I started applying at other places, and my landing spot was Gridiron Experts. That's where I ultimately settled in, and that's where I met Jody, and there was a lot of good people at Gridiron Experts, and they started getting jobs, and I saw, like, there are two different ways, and I think this could be valuable for people listening. Like, you'll see people's Twitter bios, and they're writing for 17 different sites. I saw Gridiron Experts as an opportunity to where I can be the guy. Let me put all of my content here. And then that's where Faceoff was born with Mike Hoff. That's where we had so like literally fantasy rankings, everything, my whole hub was Gridiron Experts. And I feel like for me, that rather than working or writing for a bunch of sites, growing with Gridiron Experts to me helped me a lot, immensely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. I like to hear that. It's refreshing to hear. When I first started writing, it was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go in and find a site that I want to write for, and I ended up with Fighting Chance Fantasy, and
good.
Nice
Ryan's
little start.
Great.
Yeah, Ryan's great. So it was just like to start out there and be able to do that. So it's excellent. And you brought up podcasting, and that's been a big part of your journey as well. And I know podcasting, I've talked to lots of people on here who are like, when I first started podcasting, it's completely different than how it is now, like all the things that have changed and everything. But how did you first decide you wanted to start podcasting?
I'm very like research, self-aware, and I realized the business that like, and I got lucky, and I met somebody on LinkedIn who I'm not going to bring up any names, and he worked for a bigger company, and this is something I skipped going into it when I got in. There was a broadcasting college or school, Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I don't even know if it's still alive. And they promised people jobs. And I asked him about it before because I took a tour and I was going to go. And the guy literally told me, this isn't something you can learn. Like, you can learn the back end of stuff, but like, you either know sports or you don't. There's nothing they're going to teach you, and they're also not going to get you a job worthwhile. You just kind of need to go for it. So that's kind of what I went and run with. So like, yeah.
But had you ever had any experience before doing something like that, or was it just
No.
like you were just going with
Well,
it?
I was a salesman,
Yeah.
right? So like, I'm used to talking to people anyway.
Mhm.
But like oddly enough, like like some people, they're different online. The more I was terrified to be on Twitter. Like I'm good in the real world. I was terrified to be online where like my initial, like all I used to post on Twitter was content links. I never put my takes out there. I didn't want to be criticized.
Mhm.
Where at home, like on my day to day, I'm cool with it. For some reason, I was intimidated by Twitter. And that changed. And when that changed for me is when everything opened up with my career. But like, yeah, like I latched on to Mike Hoff because we met at Gridiron and we were kind of trying to find, okay, like podcast teams. And we had a lot of stuff in common, like wrestling. So like and he was always a host. I was a co-host and I was comfortable with that. So like, that's, I kind of we latched on to each other and we developed a rapport, but I had zero experience and I was very much self-taught. I had to teach myself uploading, and before StreamYard, if you wanted to do video content, you had to use OBS, and that's a pain in the ass. Anybody know out there know, like not everybody like had a video podcast, and that was something I'm like, wow, like if I can learn this, I can get ahead of a lot of people, and I can get Faceoff ahead. So like I remember like initially we had very good video quality because I kind of locked myself into a room and learned how to do it by watching YouTube videos and hanging out in forums. My wife still probably hates me to this day for it, but she didn't see me for a good month. Like that's literally all I did was learn how to work OBS and do video stuff. Like anything, writing. I probably wouldn't be here without Grammarly.
Yeah.
Like
Word.
That is one thing I tell, any new writer, if you don't have Grammarly and you're not a good, like that's literally probably what saved my ass a lot of times, because I was not a good writer. That told me where to put commas. Like I know where to put commas now because of Grammarly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like
Grammarly is such a great tool.
Yeah.
Boom.
But yeah, a lot of it's just sacrifice and a lot of sacrifice to do this stuff, like if you really want to make this a career, you got to sacrifice.
Yeah. So sacrificing, and like you said, your wife was probably, mad at it, but like, how does your family feel about it now that you've, I'm sure they were supportive at the beginning, but now that you've, no.
My wife was, but it was still issues. Like, my mother will always support anything I do, but like my father, he's like, there's not enough jobs out there. So that kind of put a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, so why can't I get one? My in-laws didn't even know what the hell it was, so it was just like a lot of, and I'm the type of person, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. So it was just a lot of, chips on my shoulder to where like there was, I felt like failure couldn't be an issue. And, easier said than done because I almost quit a lot.
Yeah.
Thank God I didn't. But like, yeah. So like mixed bag of emotions from my family with it. But I kind of saw it as like, if I ever got to a place where I didn't feel like I was progressing, right? Like I wasn't going to, if I was doing this 5 years and I still had 200 Twitter followers and I wasn't, I didn't feel like I was progressing. Okay, then it's time to go. This isn't meant to be.
Right.
But there was always something I felt like I was picking up these small wins and chipping away at it. That kept me going. And literally right before, because I did get to a point where I felt like, all right, like real money's not coming in. And it's fun to like get a name out there and get followers, but like I wasn't making the money. And I, had a conversation with my wife. I'm like, I think I need to pack it in. And she didn't want me to. I was seriously considering it and going through a lot of mental health stuff. And I started seeing other people start doing this when, sports betting started becoming more prominent and legal. And I never did sports bet, even though I bet, I gamble. but I never did sports betting content. And that was a game changer, because as crowded as the fantasy space is, sports betting has a lot of money out there, a lot of jobs. There's a lot of money to be made. And I began, and there's a site called The Game Day. They were a startup, and I started writing sports betting content. And, the freelance rate for sports betting affiliates is a lot higher than a freelance rate for doing fantasy articles. So it wasn't what I was in love. I'm not in love with that content, but it paid bills.
Right.
And it gave me a chance to hang around and do what I love, which is podcasting. So it's kind of like I had to do what I had to do. And I grew to really enjoy the business end. It wasn't just being a creator. There's a whole back end business end of things that, and I guess that's the salesman in me that really spoke to me and triggered me to be like, wow, like I like this. And I started freelancing everywhere I could in the sports betting affiliate field. And, full-time job-wise, they weren't exactly great paying jobs. Like, I was making more money as a freelancer than the job offers I was getting. And my wife works, she's a union UPS employee. She gets great benefits with her union. So I didn't necessarily need benefits. So I freelance until the right opportunity came. And then it was basically a spot I couldn't say no to. I'm like, all right, it's time to go full-time. But yeah, it took a lot of fucking time, a lot of years, a lot of mental health struggle not to quit to get here.
Wow. I say wow because, like, yeah, I feel like I'm trying to do that kind of thing where I want to be full-time in this industry. So I'm at home working and working, quote unquote, they call it working, but you're not bringing in a paycheck. So you know what I mean? Like, I've had to save and do all this stuff.
Yep.
And my wife is supportive too. My dad was totally like, no, don't quit a job and then have no plan. And I'm like, I do have a plan. Like, I have a plan, and
there's a plan.
And I always know that there's always, I can always go back to my job if I really want to. But, I at this time, I'm continuing this. But yeah, you brought up like mental health. And I know that you're a big supporter of mental health, and not only in this space, but in general, just people being able to talk about that. And you have your podathon and everything, which we'll get into as well. But like the mental health side of like going through that journey of starting out and trying to be full-time and all of that. Like, I know I've struggled with that, with my anxiety, like hardcore. Like, on days when you were having days like that, like, was there a way for you to like kind of like bring yourself back down and clear your head and kind of, or did you just kind of have to get through it?
Half get through it, half and to this day, like, the gym is a big part. It's been a big part of my life since I was 16, but like training in the morning, it helps. But there's some days that even getting all of that aggression out and releasing, because if you have an addiction like opiates, especially, like, your natural endorphins are kind of shot. So like that natural happy, the natural smile I used to have is gone. And over 11 years clean, that's probably not coming back. So it's like I have to release them and find my release. And a lot of that is training. Just starting my day like that, it gets me going in the right direction, so I'm not waking up depressed. But like, yeah, like a lot of mental health struggles within my journey. And sometimes you just push through. Sometimes, and I did have a period where I crashed. I had a mental breakdown. And that's when, like, I had to go and go into therapy. Because, like, at this time, like, the podathon might have been a year old, and I wasn't really open on the first one. But that second one, I think it was the second one, when I just had my breakdown, just started going to therapy, and I'm like, wow, like, this helps. Because that was like the complete, like, open me up to, like, and just changed my life, I feel like. And just talking about, like, now, if I feel like I'm gonna have a mental breakdown, I will put it on Twitter, because I know people will DM me and pull me out of a hole. Because I was just talking about this with somebody, like, I'm the type of person where if I'm an isolator, and I'll go into like almost like protection mode where it's like I turn into I feel like a zombie or a robot, get emotionless, and just put a wall up and isolate any people, outside of my wife. Like, who cares about? I will just shut everybody off, cut people off, and not talk. It's just a defense mechanism. And that's what happens to me when I go into these mental health breakdowns, to where now I'll reach out to people and I won't let myself get there. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would just cut everybody off, not because I was being mean, but because I felt like it was me against the world. When I get into these mental health ruts, I'm like, I'm the only one who can pull myself out of this. So like, if it lasted 2 weeks, I would just be in a mental fuck fest for 2 weeks and just like, I don't even know what the word is. I don't know how. You're just there, and you're just, when is this going to end?
Yeah, I get that. I can relate to that, man. And going to therapy, like, just changed things for me to be able to open up more with people and, and realize that other people were going through the same things that I'm going through. And that's what's awesome about, like you said, if you put it out there, like, people will come into your DMs and give you, like, not only like the encouragement, but also a lot of people have dealt with the exact same thing. So it's nice to have somebody you can just talk to. Like, it's so important. And I get it. And yeah, I think I became a lot more of myself once I started talking to my therapist too, like presenting myself like, this is who I really am, like not trying to hold back on like everything's peachy, because life isn't always peachy. And,
No.
So, okay, let's talk about the potathon, because it's a really cool idea. It's a great thing. I love tuning into it. I love the fact that Hayden Hurst, we'll get into all of that, but how did it come about in the first place?
It was actually Mike Hoff's idea. He initially, brought it up, and I, obviously being his co-host, like, yeah, let's do a 24-hour potathon. I'm like, okay, this is great. And obviously being, an addict, mental health and addiction goes hand in hand. But again, year one, I wasn't too big into the mental health part or opening up. But like now, like I do correlate the two, and I try to put more of my addiction side out there, because I feel like, there are a lot of people struggling with addiction, or how to come out of addiction, or how to handle I can talk about that very easily. I've been through, everybody has done some bad shit during their addiction. I don't have a criminal record. I was never in trouble with the police, but it doesn't mean I didn't do bad shit. I just got lucky.
Yeah. You didn't get caught. So that's exactly, I know my 20s were a lot.
And I feel like a lot of people who go through that, they make their bad decisions, and then like they can never get over themselves. And it's like, you gotta forgive yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, and if you don't, then you are going to have the mental health struggles even worse. So yeah, there's that correlation between the two that I try to put out there more so than anything else.
Yeah, you have to be kind to yourself. You can't. I mean, we're always growing. We're always learning. So like, yeah. Well, okay. With the Hayden Hurst Foundation becoming a part of, the potathon, how did that come about? And then like being able to speak with like you, I know you've had a bunch of people on the potathon, big names, and like, yeah, could you just talk about how that all came together?
Again, this was all Hoff's idea.
I know it is. We're gonna have to get him on here.
I think at the time that I don't know if that's when initially the Hayden Hurst struggle and story came out, but he actually reached out to the foundation and pitched it, and they bought in. And that's kind of like, that's how it came about. And as far as getting guests, like, we do all the light work ourselves in reaching out to guests, putting this all together.
That's, I mean, and I'm sure it's a lot of work to do it. I know it's rewarding as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. To put together something like that, yeah. But like doing it is so important for the space. And it is awesome to see how many people tune in and come on the show and just kind of talk about either their struggles or, anything, and to have a platform to do that. So we appreciate you, and we just appreciate you. Okay. You and Mike both are doing something wonderful there. So thank you again. I always fangirl on this thing, but
No, I love the podathon, and we broke instead of going 24 straight hours. We realized, especially being United States based, that overnight was kind of like a dead zone anyway. So what we do is we do I think it's 7. We're going to be doing 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday, and then 7 a.m. 7 p.m. Sunday. I just feel like it's more actionable that way anyway, because like the overnight, of course, we have people in other countries, UK, Australia, who will support it, but it's really more of a dead zone.
right.
Being a business person, and it's better for our bodies to have to be able to have that, go to sleep a little bit early, wake up 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then do it again.
Yeah.
Easier to line guests up that way. But yeah, it's it gets a lot because there's a lot of airtime, but like you'll get that second wind when you hear other people comment, or you'll see in the comments like, hey, I went to therapy because of this, or this really helped, and it kind of drives me.
Yeah.
It really does. And especially when I can really, or if we have a guest we never had on and they're telling their story and it like triggers me, like in a good way, like, wow, like I could really relate to this person.
God, I know it sucks that we have problems, but it's also super nice to know that like we're not the only ones going through it, like, and we can have each other's backs. And yeah, more people I think need to, just have that open conversation about mental health. And it does, I don't know, I like to talk, so it makes me feel a lot better to get everything off my chest now. So
there's a stigma against mental health, and there's also a stigma against addicts that like, oh, all addicts are scumbags. Right. Well, in rehab, I was in rehab with like doctors and lawyers who were prescribed painkillers that became too expensive. They started doing heroin. Like that's just, these are educated. These aren't just people on the street. These are real people, real jobs, good jobs, who just happen to have that addictive gene when it comes to a certain substance. But yeah, there's that stigma that like, oh, if I tell people I'm an addict, what are they going to think of me? Or are they going to think I robbed the bank? Or they think I robbed my family? Like, there's a lot of, get over it.
Yep.
Like we need to get it out here that like, hey, like I lived that life. My wife, like my wife Rehab, she lived that life. We're good people. We just had some fucked up shit happen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And get over it, guys. So for real. So, okay. You also you're part of the Fantasy Pros Expert Consensus rankings. I know that rankings are important to you, and I know that you're good at them. But how did that come about? How did you start doing that?
When I was at Gridiron Experts, he put me in the ECR, which is the Expert Consensus rankings, and inconsistent. I've had good years, I've had bad years, but that's how that, like, whoever owns a website can enter guys in the ECR, and that's really it. It is probably the most humbling thing you can do in this business, because that you literally get your rankings graded, and like the way we rank players, well, at the end of the week, we get ranked. And if there's 150 people in the ECR, I know what it is to come in the top 15, and I know what it is to come in the bottom 10. And that sucks, but it's very humbling. It kind of like shuts you up a little bit.
Hey everyone, Kacey Kasem here. I want to take a moment to tell you about Sunday Dreamers Club, my fantasy football inspired t-shirt store. If you're looking for unique, stylish, and comfortable apparel that showcases your love for fantasy football, look no further than sundaydreamersclub.com. Whether you're gearing up for the next big game, hosting a draft party, or just want to sport some awesome gear, Sunday Dreamers Club has got you covered. With a variety of designs and styles to choose from, there's something for every fantasy football fan out there. Your support means the world to me, and there are so many ways you can help me grow this new small business. Grab a shirt or two for yourself or as a gift for your fantasy football league mates, or you can spread the word to your friends and family. Every bit helps, and I truly appreciate your support. Thanks for listening, and now let's get back to the show. Yeah, I remember going on to, Fantasy Pros back in the day and just being the person who was consuming content and doing all that. But there was like, you could go in and answer questions and whatever and see where you ended up at the end of the week on, versus all the experts. Yeah. And I got all excited when I was like top 10 one week, so
it's not easy. It's not, because
I don't even know how you guys do it.
Players to rank. I think we go like 15, like 25 quarterbacks, 60 running backs, 60 or 80 receivers, 30 for like there's a lot of players, and they all like you got to do your rankings for Thursday night football. If there's a Saturday, there's gonna be a lot of Saturday games now, and each ranking time, if you mess one up, that could really kill your week. Or if you leave a guy who's all of a sudden inactive in your rankings, that will kill your week because they're not going to take him out for you. You got to do it. So it's very consuming on a Sunday morning when you're trying to lock your own fantasy lineups and your own bets. And then on top of it, like, the injury report or the inactives come out, and then like, oh, I got to go back in and I got to move this guy up. I got to take this guy out, and I got to do this here for Superflex. There's a lot going on.
And you have to set your own lineups, and you have to do all this other stuff too. So I get it. Well, I don't do rankings. I've never done rankings. It's just, I don't know. It's just not my jam. But what is your process like when you go into doing rankings? Like how is that whole thing?
I mean, there's projection tools and algorithms and stuff out there. Nothing I've created, but things I've gotten from other people. And it starts with my weekly projections. And then I start moving players around, or if there's a certain player I really like that week, or he's in a good matchup, I will move them up. And the same thing goes the other way. I will move a player or a couple players down. You have to, and I'm not going to say I do this for every single player, but every week there's a good chunk of players that I'm going to be higher or lower on than the consensus. And that's basically where the process starts. Like everybody has their own process. I came up old school. I'm still old school. Even though the analytics or the metrics says one thing, certain players just for some reason play really well against their opponent and they have a positive track record. I'm going to go with that player, even though, the player could be on a cold streak for 3 games. But like, I know years ago this worked. Like anytime Zeke played the Eagles, he was good to go off. Just anytime Brady played the Falcons up until like his last year, anytime, whether it was at the Super Bowl with the Patriots or his 20-year history with the Patriots, and then he goes to Tampa, you better believe I went with that. I knew it was a new team and everything was new for Brady, but you better believe he crushed the Falcons in his first couple games with Tampa. And I'll go. So yeah, that's my process. Like people don't believe in gut feeling anymore. I will trust myself more than I trust any algorithm or metric. I trust myself.
And that's a breath of fresh air to hear that you trust yourself. Because I know a lot of people, me included, when I first started, felt like, it had to be a certain way and I have to like go with the consensus and I have to do this and I have to do that and everything. So being able to hear you say like, yeah, it might be, I might be down on a guy or I might be higher up on a guy than most people. Let's go with your gut. And I appreciate that.
If you don't trust yourself, then how are other people going to trust you?
100%. Yeah.
And it was scary, and again, like I told you, just that my initial fear of being judged, like I did go with other processes and I'm like, this wasn't working for me. And I just started just doing things my way and what worked for me.
Well, it works. So I want to say thank you again. You can go with your guy. It's okay. So let's talk about SEO, because that's kind of like a topic people bring up all the time on here. But I don't know if I actually get a good definition of it when I kind of skip over the fact and forget that people might not know what SEO is. But we were talking about your day job prior to actually going live with this and everything. Can you just like give a explanation as to what SEO exactly is?
SEO, and I'm still learning as I go, right? So I'm not exactly an expert yet. So, but SEO is something that changes a lot. What it is search engine optimization. It's optimizing content to rank high in a search engine like Google, which is the king of search engines. So like, my job is to keyword research, structure content, make sure the H1, which is you have your title, the H2, which is your main talking points in the article. You want the right keywords. What are people searching for? You have to understand content the intent of a piece of content? Is it commercial? Is it to sell a product or promote a promo code? Is it news-based? Is it informational, like a start sit article? A news-based article might be a player injury now. So like it's basically understanding content and keywords. And you also have to understand Google, because Google changes its algorithm, its SEO algorithm, apparently a lot.
Yeah, I hear that.
So I'm still learning it myself, but it is something that, when I first got into business, I did not know, nor did I care about SEO. But like, as I was freelancing, somebody took like, listen, like, when I got my full-time job, they're like, you understand SEO, you just don't know it, because he just knew me. And he's like, I think you would be good at it, so take a shot. So it was basically like him taking a shot on me and knowing that, when you write SEO optimized content, you just don't know why you're doing it yet, but I'll teach you that.
Okay.
Yeah, as
SEO
crazy
is
as it sounds, like,
yeah. No, it's interesting, because I just started writing again, and I took a break, so I hadn't been writing for a couple of years, and I get back into it and writing with different sites and doing all that, and like SEO keywords, making sure that your H2 is, and doing all that stuff. I didn't realize how important it was until somebody sat me down and like showed me, and then I was like, oh, well, duh, why wouldn't I be doing this stuff? Of course, So
like a fun SEO fact. I'm not sure how updated this, but I recently read that the number one organic search result, so the article that's ranked number one, is 10 times more likely to get somebody to click on it than somebody ranked in position 10 or 12. And it's so like, whoever's ranked number one, let's say it's a small website nobody's ever heard of, and then you have ESPN at number 10. Whoever's ranked number one, like, people are going to click on that article. It's just human nature.
Right. 100%.
There's even metrics for the behavior of somebody. So like, there's a metric out there, and I wish if I knew you were going to ask me about SEO, I would have brought it in front of me. But like, people don't want to scroll twice on their mobile device. So basically, if you have a piece of content and your intent is to sell a promo code or to sell something, and they have to flick their thumb twice to get to where they need to go, they will leave and go somewhere else.
Learning so much. I mean, geez.
That's crazy. And to me, that sounds crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But that apparently is the way people are. So like, we as an SEO, you want to get your content ranked number one, or like at least in the top 3, because the percentage of somebody who's going to click on it drops dramatically. So even if you get first page, like a lot of like SEO or people are having, I'm on the first page of Google. If you're on the bottom of the first page, you might as well not even be there.
That makes sense.
And again, like, me doing this job is something I'm learning, but like, I would think 2-3 years ago, getting on the first page was gold, but no, apparently it's not. It's not good enough. You got to be in that top 3.
Oh my gosh, that's so much to wrap your head around too. Like, I get it. And with it ever changing, I mean, I don't know. It's always changing. And then I see like videos on YouTube that are like, SEO is dead, right? I haven't clicked on any of them to actually watch them, because I don't believe that to be true, but it's out there. But thank you for explaining what SEO is. I was talking to my wife about it, and she's like,
I'm sure there's people smarter than me who can explain better than I can, but I give more of the raw version, because I'm still learning myself.
Right. No. And that's totally inspirational for me, because I'm just now like learning about like today I watched some SEO videos before, I came on here, just because of writing and stuff and trying to realize why I'm doing what I'm doing. You want people to click on your stuff. So
I think sense. LinkedIn has free, because they have like training courses, and I think a lot of them are free. Search SEO training courses, just start taking them and educate yourself. If SEO is something you really want to learn about or pursue as a job, those LinkedIn training courses, like, they're gold. Well, that's like free education.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because I'd love to learn as much as possible because I know,
Yeah.
the more skills you have, kind of like the more, more opportunities come to you, hopefully. Like that's what my
Yeah.
fingers cross at least. Okay.
And like
I look,
and put it like step out of your comfort zone. Like, like and this is, I guess, my biggest advice I can give to anybody who ever wants to try to do this full time. Like, I went into this wanting to be an NFL radio guy. Never wanted to write an article. I wrote a lot of articles and blurbs and it's never something I wanted to. You need to step out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to adjust. Like, yeah, sure. Some people go viral and their YouTube channel blows up and they're doing something they love from the gate. That's a very small percentage of people. Like, I would not be full time right now if I did not open my mind to learn SEO. If I would have been stubborn and said, no, like, I'm not going to take this job that you want me to do, I'm not going to be willing to learn, I think I'm going to still pursue, you need to find other avenues. And you can still create content. Like, I'm still creating content. Like, me getting hired at my employer, they also are affiliate. They own RotoWire. And through that, I am now doing NFL on-air content for RotoWire. So, like, other opportunities come from these opportunities.
exactly.
Like, just keep an open mind and try different shit.
Yeah, you kind of have to. And then, this is not the first thing that I've tried. I've tried other podcasts. I've tried other, you got to keep trying things.
Me and Hawk, we must have launched like 3 or 4 wrestling podcasts. And each time we did, the lifetime, like the first one lasts like 5 episodes and the last one lasted literally 1 episode. And now if we want to do a wrestling show, we'll just throw it on Faceoff. Like, all right, this obviously ain't us.
Well, having a co-host, I'm sure, is helpful. Like having somebody else there to host with you and to talk to guests and to bring the content, make sure that it stays fresh. Have you ever podcasted solo or is that not something? Yeah. And then what is that experience like for you?
Hoff took a little bit of a hiatus from Faceoff a couple years ago, and that made me come to a crossroads, and I had to learn to go solo. And that's a whole different approach. That's a whole different technique. Like when you're going, like one of the reasons why I love having the 2+ man team is because, well, somebody's talking, I'm getting my talking points ready. I'm doing my research. I'm loading up my answer or my reply or my take. Where if you're solo, I slow my pace down. I can't be as statistical as I want. So like it's a kind of a different approach, but I can do it. I like it. I enjoy it. It's just a completely different approach and a little bit more difficult to run a solo show because you also don't want to have a lot of dead spots too. So you have to kind of keep going. Even if you have like a brain freeze, you got to have to keep going until your brain gets back on track. And God forbid you have a technical issue if you're live.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts, but it's certainly it's something I did learn and do enjoy here and there. Sometimes I'll just come on and talk. Because really, like it's just talking.
Yeah, it is.
And that's something that took me like a lot of like probably hundreds of episodes to realize I'm just talking football. It's not that big deal.
It does. I'm always, even before I get like, I'm still 100 and whatever episodes in, and I'm always like the first 5 minutes of the conversation, I'm like, just like, I can't get out of my head.
I still get nervous. I still get nervous all these years later. And I think that's just us. Or if it's normal. It's human nature to get nervous.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I'm always nervous before I do a podcast. I am not going to lie. And people are like, oh, you don't sound like it. And it's like, well, you can't feel how I'm feeling. I promise you I am. So, okay, going back, I wanted to touch on this a little bit more about full-time in the industry because I know people listen to this podcast with hopes and dreams that will happen with them someday. I'm one of those people that listens to this podcast with that same dream, I promise. So how did that job opportunity actually present itself? I know you touched on it, but like, how were you able to go full time into this industry?
I was basically I was calling myself, a full-time freelancer. I was freelance writing for a bunch of different sites. Because you have to kind of do that when you're freelancing to once you get that money coming, like some site, they'll be like, all right, we're kind of going in dead zone with content. We might only need you for two articles this week when you're used to getting 10. So you have to kind of keep that Rolodex open. And LinkedIn was cool for that, where you put like a, commercial sports betting writer on your, people, because there's so many startups now coming in from other countries where they'll jump in your DMs and say, okay, we need you to do this, this, and this. You available? And I started freelancing for GDC, which is the gambling group, and RotoWire. And after being there for I don't even know, I would say like good 8 months of grinding for them, they became my only place I was freelancing. They gave me that much work, and a job opportunity opened up, and they're like, are you, we work with you this amount of time. We think you'd be a good fit. Are you interested? And that was it. And mind you, I turned down a few job opportunities at startups to do the same job because the money wasn't great. I'm like, but I'm making X amount more as a freelancer. Why would I? And I don't need your benefits. So why would I take this job?
Yeah.
And yes, the allure was there, because everybody wants to say they're full time, but I got a wife and a kid and 9-year-old. So being able to put full time in my bio, but take a significant hit financially was not worth it. So I just continued to freelance until the right opportunity came around, and it just happened to be where I'm at now. And it wasn't a job I loved. But it was something that I knew that I could be interested in SEO. But it was, being an editor and learning SEO that way, and then learning a little bit of everything that everybody did on my team. So I was kind of like a hybrid guy, and that kind of just steamrolled its way into becoming an SEO strategist. I was recently promoted, and it was, a lot of learning, a lot of keeping your mouth shut, doing what you're told to do, and listening.
Yeah, listening is important.
Not being a know-it-all, because again, there's so much education out there, and there's a lot of good people at my company that I can learn from. Why am I going to tell somebody doing this for 10 years and I'm not going to try your idea? I've been doing this for a couple months. Mm-hmm. No, of course I'm going to do what you're telling me to do. So there's a lot of humbling yourself and kind of shut up and learn.
Yeah, for sure. You brought up LinkedIn. I mean, you've brought up LinkedIn a few times on this podcast, and I feel like maybe that's an underused source of fantasy goodness. I don't know how to explain it, but I have a LinkedIn. I don't ever use it. But then when I go to apply for jobs, they want to know what my LinkedIn is. So probably should start using that. But
LinkedIn's essentially like your social. I say it's like a social media resume. You still need a resume, but I created my resume from my LinkedIn profile. And if you treat LinkedIn like a legitimate resume, because that's the first thing these recruiters or anybody interviewing you, they're looking at your social. Mm-hmm. Believe me, they are. When I was younger, I used to do dumb shit on social media. I don't do that anymore. There's no pictures of me all banged up at a club like I was doing in my 20s. Mm-hmm. I actually lesson learned in my 20s when I was in the car business, selling cars, a business full of degenerates. I put a picture of me up, and the company I was working for, like, hey, don't do that again. Take it off. Don't do that. Don't put our dealership's name like that. People know you work for us. You're a good salesman. Don't do that. So ever since then, I knew, okay, social media is being taken very serious by employers, and my future could depend on it. So I don't need to be out drinking at a club and putting those pictures up.
That's smart. Yeah. Yeah. I got in trouble at work one time for posting something too. And I'm like, quit, you get a phone call and you're like, how do you even know? You're not even friends with me. Who told?
I know. And even if you're private, they'll find it.
They'll find it.
There's people in HR that are,
oh, yeah.
Depending on the company, they will find you.
Yeah. Yeah. So be
But
careful
yeah,
out there.
use LinkedIn. LinkedIn's an asset.
I
You know,
really do need to.
and LinkedIn's not about followers, and it's about clout. Like LinkedIn's literally like could get you an opportunity.
Okay. That's something to take advantage of, guys. So I'm going to get on that. I'm going to make mine actually look decent. So thank you
Yeah,
so much.
these are just things that took me a lot. I've been around for a long time. I wasn't always this savvy or wise. Like I was dumb, not dumb, but like I don't know. Like I wasn't as educated in the industry as I am now, and it took a lot of trial and error, good and bad decisions to get here. And and you just try to make the best ones as they come. Like,
Yes.
this isn't like I just got into this industry, a year ago and I'm here. No, it was a lot of, like I said earlier in the show, it took a lot of years, a lot of almost quitting, a lot of sacrifice. So it's like, it's not easy, but it is possible.
With fantasy football, like, have you played any other fantasy sports besides fantasy football, or is fantasy football the only thing in that realm that you've played?
I've dabbled in other fantasy sports, but no, when it comes to fantasy sports, football is my thing. Betting is different. I'll bet on a lot of different things. Betting's a whole different area for me.
Got you.
But yeah, fantasy is just football.
Just football. So do you have a favorite football team?
Cowboys.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to bring that up because I'm a Cowboys fan too. So, hey guys, how you doing out there? We're here. So yeah, as a Cowboys fan, in fantasy football, on your rosters, can you think of a fantasy or a Dallas Cowboys player who maybe you've rostered more than anybody? Or are you one of those guys that doesn't even have any Cowboys on your teams? Or how does that work for you?
I drafted, fantasy is different for me. Like I want to win. And if it's not in my best interest to take Cowboys that year, I don't. Or if they're too expensive, like CD Lamb might be overpriced this year.
Yeah.
Dak's at a pretty good value. Zeke's going to be at a good value. So I might have, and people like to bust me because I probably will draft a lot of Zeke, but like the industries has been out on Zeke for years. And now they're going to be even more out on him because he didn't look great in New England, but there's a lot of factors of why he didn't look great. Dallas has a better offensive line. They have a quarterback. They have they have a lot more assets. And what Zeke does best, or you're not drafting Zeke to get you 1,200 yards. You're drafting Zeke because he has touchdown upside. And if you can get that touchdown upside in like the 9th round, wherever his ADP is now, then that's a pretty good deal because he'll probably return value there.
Wow. You're going to need to think differently about Zeke when it comes to fantasy football. Because I was going to ask you like how you felt about Zeke coming back to the team and everything.
Oh, I love it. As a fan, just like what they lost with Zeke last year, I think it's a big reason why Tony Pollard, because he struggled. And a lot of people thought that, like, kick Zeke out. He's holding Pollard back because Pollard looked fantastic when Zeke was there. The problem is, and my co-host now at RotoWire, Jim Coventry, actually pointed this out, and I didn't listen to him. But he's like, listen, Tony Pollard is not built as an every down back. He could get a little bit beat up. And he's not going to be as effective. And I was drafting Pollard. I was so bullish on Pollard. It did blow up my face. So, like, what made Pollard great is the fact that Zeke absorbed all that punishment. So not only did they lose that part, like that grinder, they didn't have a grinder last year. It was Pollard and Dowdle. They also were missing, like, Zeke is the heart, like Dak's the leader. Parsons the leader. Zeke is literally the heartbeat of that team. Like when Zeke comes out and runs through that stadium for the first time, the crowd's going to be electric. Like he got that sideline and that team going. Like he's the emotional leader. And I think they were missing that emotional leader in Dallas last year. And that's what Zeke's going to bring back. Not so much for fantasy, but I think he's going to be a big asset for that team as a whole.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And last year just kind of seemed like blah to me. Like there was no spark plug. There was nothing there. And so like bringing him back, I get it. I don't like Zeke, so that's just my problem. But
there's rumors that Najee is now being linked to Dallas as of the past like day or so. And I'm a Najee Harris. I love Najee.
Okay, me too.
He's in a bad, always in a bad. If he stays in Pittsburgh this year, I love it. because he is Arthur Smith's type of guy.
Yeah.
He's built like the quintessential Arthur, the big banger back. I know Bijan was misused last year. They use Algier because Algier is a bigger guy. Derrick Henry was a bigger guy who flourishes. So I think Najee in Pittsburgh is going to be, and he's cheap as hell in fantasy. So like I'm going to have a lot of Najee. Plus they declined his 50-year option. And if you're somebody who believes in incentive, I believe in human nature. Like I know like revenge games, they matter because like I'm a human. And if I got fired or cut from a team, I want to go stick it to him. So like Pittsburgh declined Najee's 50-year option. He's playing for his next contract. So I think he's going to be a little bit more incentivized if he stays there. And obviously if he goes to Dallas, that's pretty good because he's going to also be playing for a contract there and they have a really good offensive line. So, I'm buying into Najee wherever the hell he's playing.
Good, because I have a lot of Najee on my rosters. And I've been sitting here just like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to sit here. So, yeah. So, okay, what do you like to do in your free time? When you have spare time, what are the things that you like to do? I know you were talking about going to the gym as a nice outlet in the mornings, but what do you like to do?
Obviously the gym. I have hanging out with my wife, 9-year-old, family. So it's like, that's very low key type of life, I guess. Like, we still like going out and having fun, me and my wife, but it's, it's really just doing family stuff now. Yeah. I don't even know what we do anymore. Like, we've been together, like 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Me and my wife.
10
So
years.
yeah, been through a lot. So that's, we just kind of hang out. Yeah. We have friends we hang out with, but no, I like traveling. Traveling is always fun.
Where's your favorite place that you've traveled to?
So far, I would probably have to say it's between Jamaica and the Dominican. Nice. My actual favorite place is I love Disney World. I'm like a big kid anyway. So Disney's my favorite place ever. But like in terms of like big people traveling, I would say Jamaica or Dominican.
Big people traveling. I like it. Okay. Do your friends come to you for fantasy football advice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do they think about your job?
They think it's cool, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. We don't really get into that. To me, it's just, it's just I don't know. I think it's just a job. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. If I was to tell, most of my friends don't care. So as long as you're doing work, whatever.
But yeah, I do notice I get more text messages from people I only talk to from like August to February.
Funny. Funny how that works.
Cool. I enjoy giving the advice out. I can talk sports with anybody. I can talk sports all day and my betting pit. So that's always fun. But, to me, it's just like, you wake up, you get to your job, but it's just happened to be a job and something I love. I think that's important, right? Like you should do something you love as a job.
For sure.
Because you do that most of your day. Like, you're going to be doing this job possibly your whole life. So try to make it something you enjoy.
Right on. And okay, fantasy football. Question for you, but not really about fantasy football, more about like settings and scoring and stuff. Like, what's your favorite type of league to play in? And if you want to talk about scoring and settings too, but you can even just give the basics.
I would say I like PPR. I will not play in anything less than 12 teams. I don't like 10, and I think I like more people in the league because I think it's more challenging. Everybody's team isn't loaded. How you draft matters. The waiver wire process matters. So I like 12 teams. I like PPR. I also am getting more into tight end premium. I play in the FFPC, and their format is standard PPR and tight end premium 12-team roster. So that format I also enjoy, which is kind of, I guess the word's contrarian. That's the word people like to use. I like kickers and defense. I'm sorry, I do. I think there is a somewhat of a kickers and defense does matter, right? Because any position you have to start should matter to you. So like the whole theory of like, oh, just draft your whole team and then pick somebody up off waivers, I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm going to put a little bit more research in those positions because they can, like, if you get a good defense or a good kicker with a high floor, and let's say a player's hurt or one of your top players not performing, that high floor could save your ass in a week and win you a week. Like last year, if you had Dallas's defense with the rate that our corner, I forgot his name, who scored all the
Bland.
He was winning you fantasy weeks.
Yeah.
And the Dallas defense wasn't, it's not like I'm drafting the top defense early. Like I'll usually find the defense I think is going to break out, or I find the value and I'll let it come to me. And last year happened to be Dallas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I like the defense, I like special and the kicker, and then super flex. I love super flex formats, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Basic. I'm a basic guy.
I'm a basic guy. Yeah, but it's fun. It's fun. So are you redraft dynasty, all of the above? Like, what is your feeling on one over the other? Do you have a favorite?
I enjoy all the formats. I do have some long-running dynasty leagues. I'm still in my first ever dynasty league with the old guys from Gridiron Experts, and I'm in a handful of others. But like I think the dominant league type I play in is best ball, and that's because it's a little bit more cost effective, and you can draft them all off season long.
Yeah.
I'm getting more into the FFPC redraft leagues, the tournaments. Like I feel like getting into tournaments rejuvenated my love for fantasy, because like you're playing for like a good prize at the end, and there are two different formats in one, where like you not only have to win your league to get into that shootout portion, but once you get into the shootout portion, it's almost like best ball, only you got to set a lineup. So not only do you have to draft guys with variance, but you need to draft like high ceiling players. It's almost like you have to have players in your team that are not only good for best ball, but good for redraft. So it's like a whole different strategy I put into it.
Okay, before we go, I know it's always the sad portion of the show is when we have to say goodbye. It always is. I know. But Anthony, I wanted to thank you again for coming on the show. And I know it's been a while, so it's been great getting to catch up with you, get to learn more about you. But can you let everybody know what you have going on? We may not have touched on everything, but if you can let everybody know what you have going on and where they can find you, go ahead and let them know now.
I'm on the on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, at the Real NFL Guru. I have the Faceoff Sports Network still. That's at the FF Faceoff, or www.fffaceoff.com. And then I'm also doing my on-air content work now with RotoWire on their NFL programs with Jim Coventry, who played a big role in getting me on the air with them. So I owe a lot to him as well. But that's where all of my content is either going to be at Faceoff on air or at RotoWire on air.
Excellent. Everybody go check that out.
Of course, Audathon in July.
Yes.
That's
you definitely need to check that out. Yes, definitely worth a watch, worth a listen. So please tune into that. Also, make sure you tune in to another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem next week. Actually, we'll see. I might be putting out two at this time. Who knows? But yeah, go ahead and follow Anthony. And if you guys want to check out anything else, well, go listen to some more episodes. Remember to stay rad. I almost forgot that part.
Get real. Time to get real, everybody.